Hey guys, this is God of Politics, and welcome back to a brand new video. But before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are linked down in the description. But today's video is going to be what an electoral landslide looks for Donald Trump. This is not really a best case scenario, but rather, if Donald Trump wins in a landslide, what will the map actually look like? So back in 2016, he obviously won 306 electoral votes. Some people consider that a landslide. I wouldn't consider it a so-called landslide, but he can possibly gain on those margins if he's going to have a really good night. And we're going to be analyzing what the electoral landslide map would look like if Donald Trump were to win in a landslide. So we're going to be going through all the safe states first, starting with Idaho. Actually, let's just fix this here. So Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Alaska, now South Dakota, North Dakota, all of Nebraska except for the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma. Donald Trump could probably squeak out a safe margin in Texas. He won it by exactly 9 in 2016. If he has a really good night, he's winning all these other places, he might be able to possibly win Texas by just a bit over 10, as well as Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Missouri, as well as Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, South Carolina, as well as Maine's 2nd District. So that puts Donald Trump at 188 safe electoral votes. And then for Joe Biden, it would be California, Washington, Illinois, Hawaii, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, Maryland, Delaware, and that's actually going to be it, I believe. Actually, DC as well. So Maryland, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Rhode Island both went by under 15 in 2016. And I do believe that if Donald Trump has a really good night, he could bring them under 10, but it would take a lot. But the Northeast has been trending red if you look at trends anyway. So I'm going to put those in the likely margin. When we get to those likely margin states, that's 150 safe electoral. Actually, I'll also put Maine's 1st District as a safe margin. That's 151 safe electoral votes for Joe Biden and 188 safe electoral votes for Donald Trump. Now, the likely states, I believe Oregon would be a likely state. It's actually trending a bit to the right column because of those rural areas, and I believe that Donald Trump might be able to bring it down into the likely column, but we'll see about that. As well as the state of New Jersey, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. These are just states that might be a little bit closer in this election as opposed to some other elections because they have been trending quite a bit to the right column. But whether that continues is another question. But for now, I'm going to put those in the likely margin. And then for Donald Trump, I believe Georgia, he could maybe buck the trend just for this one election in those suburban areas and gain some of those voters back, winning it by a similar margin to what he won it last time, maybe around 5 to 6 is what I think he would win it by in this scenario, and that would push it into the likely margin. Same thing with North Carolina. I went by a very, a bit 2 points less than Georgia. I believe that Donald Trump, he has a bit more room to gain in some of these rural areas than he does in a state like Georgia, and so he might be able to gain just a slightly bit more in this scenario where he's winning by an electoral landslide. And so that's all the likely states. So Donald Trump is inching closer to 270 electoral votes. He is at 219 already. Joe Biden is at 183 electoral votes. And then for the lean states, I believe that the state of Virginia would be a lean state. This is a state that's been trending blue for quite a while now. I believe that in a normal situation where nobody's winning by a landslide, this would probably be by a likely margin by around 7 to 8 points. But in this scenario, I do believe Donald Trump could bring it down to around 4 to 5, 3 to 4 maybe, in a very good scenario. But I don't think he's going to be able to win the state. And that's actually all the lean margin states for the president here. For Vice President Joe Biden here. And then the next lean margin states would be the states of Nevada. I believe that Donald Trump could gain a bit with Latinos here. Whether they'll actually do that is another question, but there's possibility there, as well as the state of Arizona. If he has a good night, he can win Arizona by a lean margin by around 2 to 3 points maybe, but it is definitely going to be closer here. As well as the state of Florida, he could maybe win it by just above 2, but it will be close in all elections. Even in 2008, when Barack Obama won in a landslide, it was still very close. So I do believe that it will be a similar scenario there, as well as Nebraska's 2nd District will be by a lean margin as well. You've got actually suburban trends here, but you do have a Bernie Bro running in the congressional district race, which could hurt Joe Biden at the top of the ticket just a little bit. And so I do believe that that would go by a lean margin in a good scenario, but it probably would go by 4 to 5, to be honest. Actually, that would be pretty good for him considering the suburban trends. The next state would actually be Wisconsin, pushing him over to the top here to 276 electoral votes from the state here. Wisconsin's actually a state that you could argue is trending in opposite directions of states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, because Wisconsin has stayed, it was a lot closer in the governor election in 2018. The congressional districts are still Republican. The state legislature is still Republican. And you could argue the same thing about Michigan and Pennsylvania, but there are different factors to that. And so I do believe that at this point, at least for this election, Wisconsin is going to be to the right of states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota, which we'll talk about in a second. And so that's why I'm going to put the state of Wisconsin into the lean margin. And the next state is going to be the state of New Hampshire here. New Hampshire, I will also believe, could go by a lean margin. Donald Trump only lost by a couple thousand votes last time. If he does hold some campaign rallies there, whether we'll even be having campaigning or not is a whole other question. But if there is campaigning, Donald Trump, he can go into these bigger places in New Hampshire, win over some voters there, and it wouldn't take too much to win the state. Hillary didn't do well in the primary there, and neither did Joe Biden. Whether that hurts them or not, it's a whole nother question, but I do believe that Donald Trump, in a very good scenario where he's able to win by a landslide, he would easily win the state of New Hampshire, if we're being honest here. And then getting in these tilt margin states, we can see here, Joe Biden's only at 196 electoral votes. Donald Trump is already at 280 electoral votes. And we'll start with the Rust Belt here, because these two states are a bit interesting. Pennsylvania, I'm going to put at a tilt margin. Michigan, I'm going to put at a tilt margin. And Minnesota, I'm actually going to put at a tilt margin as well. I don't believe that Donald Trump will be able to gain too much in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, even in a scenario where he's shifting other states, 4 to 5 points to the right. I don't believe that's going to happen in Michigan, Pennsylvania. These are states that are traditionally Democratic. Obama won Michigan by 7 or something points in 2012, and then suddenly Donald Trump won it. I don't believe he can have another 7-point trend after that, because if you're using that same logic, states like Texas would barely be going to Donald Trump. States like Arizona would be in the Democratic column already in a normal scenario, and so I don't believe that's what's going to happen here. I do believe that if it's a good scenario for Donald Trump, if he's winning by a landslide, he will win these states, but he's going to still win them narrowly. He'll win Michigan maybe by 1 to 2 and Pennsylvania by 1 to 2 as well. It's really not going to be much. As for Minnesota, I do believe Minnesota is a state that Donald Trump actually does have some opportunity in. It's kind of the one that got away in 2016. It's that one Rust Belt state that Donald Trump did not win, obviously, other than Illinois. But it is a state that Donald Trump lost by 1.5 percentage points, and I do believe that he'd probably be able to win it by around just under 1 percentage point in this scenario, just because he'd be having a really good night. He could get that shift further to the red column, pushing over some of those legacy Democrats up in the northern area here, some of them that are voting for Amy Klobuchar, things like that. I also believe that Maine at large would be a tilt margin to Donald Trump here. It trended, if you look at the trends, it trended heavily to the red column in 2016 as opposed to 2012 if you compare those results. And again, I'm not going to keep that trend continuing, but if Donald Trump does have a very good night, he can get a lot of those rural voters in Maine's 2nd district, as well as winning some of the voters over from Maine's 1st district, making it so that he wins the popular vote by a tilt margin, maybe by around 1 percentage points. And getting into Colorado and New Mexico here, it's very interesting. I believe that Donald Trump would narrowly lose the state of Colorado, even in a scenario where he's winning by electoral landslide, because if you look at these suburbs, these areas in Colorado Springs that were once Republican hotspots here, they're becoming much less Republican. And I believe even if Donald Trump's having a really good night, even if he's winning by a landslide, he still won't be able to win Colorado. Colorado polling does overestimate Democrats, does overestimate Republicans, actually, and Donald Trump's actually doing not so good here. He's down, by likely safe margins, and while that polling might not necessarily be the best polling, Joe Biden is still in a good position here, and if Donald Trump is having a really good night, if the economy is recovering, if things like that are still going well, Colorado is a state that could get a lot closer. He could buck some of the trends, but I do believe that Joe Biden would still end up winning it at the end of the day. As for New Mexico, I also do believe that New Mexico would narrowly go. A lot of the Gary Johnson, Hillary won the state by 8 percentage points, but Gary Johnson got 9% of the vote. The state's been trending towards the Democratic column. A lot of those people that voted for Gary Johnson in the state of New Mexico are people that were once Republicans, now Democrats, that went back and voted for their former Republican governor. That's what you can speculate why so many of those voters went to Gary Johnson. And so I do believe that if you're arguing, oh, all of Gary Johnson's voters are going to go directly to Donald Trump, I don't believe that's what's going to happen. I do believe that there is going to be more of an even split from the state of New Mexico, which is why it won't be as close as some people think, but it'll be similar to the state of Colorado. If you're really being generous to Donald Trump, you give him Colorado, you give him New Mexico, and he's at 342 electoral votes. But I'm not going to assume that he's going to be able to do that, so in his landslide victory, he would get 328 electoral votes. That is what I would be predicting his landslide victory would be. Tomorrow I'll be doing Joe Biden's landslide victory, which, as you'll see, is a lot easier for him to get just because of the nature of how these states are going. But stay tuned for that tomorrow. I'll be putting up that video tomorrow, but I'll be putting this video up today. So thank you all for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, as well as join the Discord, and I will see you guys later.